What's up, everyone? There's a great story that I want to share with you. There was a widow who had two children and she was struggling. She was in a tough way. And so she wandered down by a lake and she was upset and crying. Her head was in her hands. And out of seemingly nowhere, this beautiful golden swan came up to her. And she, not thinking about it because she was so enveloped in what she was struggling with, she just started saying the things that were wrong, the struggles that she had, no money. And this beautiful golden swan plucked out a feather and handed it to her. And here she had a golden feather. She was overcome with joy, with gratitude. She was so thankful. She expressed the gratitude and she ran home. She was able to pay some debts and feed her children. And she came back the next day to again say, "Thank you so much. I was able to pay off some debts. I was able to feed my children." Well, the swan again plucked out a feather and gave it to her. Again, she was filled with tremendous gratitude. So she went home. But that night, when she was at home, she was visited by a dark figure, a figure that we all know to be greed. And greed started to whisper to her, "Hey, that swan doesn't need those golden feathers. Hey, you're owed those golden feathers. And hey, why don't you take that swan and get rid of a bunch of those feathers for yourself, and you'll never have to worry about money again." And unfortunately, that woman was overcome with these thoughts. She allowed greed to dictate her mentality. You could see the change even in her eyes. And so the next day she went down to the lake, and this time she feigned crying and being upset. And when the swan came close to her, she grabbed it and started ripping out the feathers in horror and shock. But as she was pulling the feathers out, she looked, and when they were on the ground, they turned from gold to just normal feathers. In her own shock, she let the swan go. When the swan backed up and stepped away from her grasp, he then spoke. And he told her that those feathers could only be gold if he willingly gave them to someone. But when someone takes them by force, they will no longer be gold. And in that moment, everything in her just dropped. By the time she looked up again, the swan was gone, never to return again. The lesson of this story is powerful. It's one that impacts all of us. You, me, we will all be faced with conversations with greed. The question is, what will you do with it? Look, it's difficult not to be swept away by the thoughts that greed will deliver. But one of the most important lessons that any of us can ever learn is to understand that greed does not have our best interest in mind. Even when people gain a great deal by greed, eventually they face themselves and the hollowness, the emptiness inside of knowing that they were led like a puppet by greed into a realm that they don't want to be in. Look, this message is powerful. This story is powerful, and I hope it helps. Until next time, as always, I wish you much peace.